So, hello everybody, good morning. I'm happy to be here and provide you with a bit of inspiration and also a foundation of the approach that you will be using today for the workshop. The talk that I have prepared, it's called Service Ideation for Climate Policy Challenges. And I will be drawing on an example and a case that comes from a course that is called Design for Government. This is a course that we have at the master's levels as part of the Creative Sustainability Master Program at the Aalto University Department of Design. My name is Núria Solsona, and I'm a university lecturer. I teach the practice of service design in different contexts, for example, in commercial, non-commercial services, but also for policy development. And I'm the course director of this course that is called Design for Government, that in which we partner up every year with different ministries and national level administration and actors in Finland to help them address national level challenges such as energy transitions that with a design approach. We use this course as a kind of an open learning platform to advocate for design as an approach for government and governance. And so this is a little bit what I intend to do also with this talk, to advocate for this design approach and hopefully give you enough reasoning and inspiration that you can already start using it today for the afternoon that you have planned with the workshop. Let's move on. So before I show you this case, I wanted to do an oversimplification of the way that we see policy making as a process that Miranda was already introducing, and I will be referring to her opening words also here. We approach, let's say, policy development with a critical eye. In this oversimplification, we can explain, for example, that a policy development or policy making process is generally divided in two parts. The first part on the left is this policy framing part, and there is a second part that is called the implementation part. Of course, there is a cyclical series of steps here of agenda setting, framing the intent, evaluation, yada, yada. But we see a big disconnect between the development of policies and the implementation of these goals and intentions and intents then in the reality of the development of services. And so this is a little bit what Miranda was saying earlier. How do we connect these two worlds? How do we connect and integrate the implementation that reflects the policy development, which is also informed by science and data? One of the problems that we see in this approach is that these are two parts that are not connected, we said that, but also there is a set of group of people, decision makers, that participate in one part and do not participate in the other. So there is also a lack of expertise that is lacking to inform within each phase. Also, there is a problem of delays. So to develop policy takes a lot of time. So between what the process of foreseeing a policy and then implementing, there has been some delays. And with these delays, there are then changes in the plans of this, how we implement these plans later on. And so the time factor between this development and implementation is one of the pitfalls of this traditional model. There's another challenge that we see here in this traditional model, which is the linearity of thinking. There is this logic of approaching policy as a predictable problem. We first think about this with the data that we have, and therefore the future can be like that. I mean, when we put it into practice, when we put these instruments in the life of people, this will happen. But there is time delays. There's some cycles in the policy and the political program that don't allow us to do it immediately, and therefore this time also accounts for this forecasting being failed at the end of the day. And I apologize for the emails. I don't know how to turn out the sound. Hopefully you don't hear it. And then in this predictability, also what we see that there is a shortcoming is that it assumes that the data is known, that the problem is known, and that the future is known. But what happens when you don't have the data? What happens when the future is unknown? So here is where we develop this idea with design to move from forecasting to imagination. And just to introduce you a little bit where design plays a role here, I'm using this article from Junginger that I have put in the reference if you're interested in checking it out. Traditionally, design has played a role here in the implementation, in the downstream, when decisions have been made, executing plans, executing these policies into actions and realities. And the role has been to communicate this policy by developing services and products. But we argue that design also has a role here upstream in informing new and existing policies and envisioning future policies for these uncertain futures. Therefore, we suggest a more dynamic approach. And this is the basis and the mindset that we want you to practice today in the workshop. Instead of thinking about policy is one thing, implementation is one thing, my role is in one part and not the other, we want to challenge you today to practice this. Let's think about these two worlds together. Let's think about implementation, in this case, where the service happens, where the execution of a policy happens. Let's think about it as a mechanism to help us imagine policy. And let's use this mechanism then to think about the policies in a way that will feed back to this implementation, instruments, services that then realize these goals and these policies into actions. We can think about, also we like this idea of the infinite loop because there's no solutions to climate change. It's like not one solution. I don't want to be pessimistic, but there's no one single solution like, ta-da, this is the $1 million idea that's gonna solve it. Instead, what we need is entry points for slowly changing together and developing these changes that requires changes that are required at different systems level at different steps. So that's also what this loop intends to communicate, is that there is an iterative, ongoing, and infinite possibilities for addressing change. You can also think about, using the metaphor of this infinite loop, you can also think about that these two worlds then connect analysis with execution, they connect an upstream with the downstream part of the policy development process. But also you can think about, going back to the keynote, the previous keynote, you can think about this being national level connected to cities. We can think about the different actors, government connecting then with public administration and public services and private services and third sector. So connecting the decision makers with the civil society. So let's think about also the people and the different kind of mindsets that we will be using by unifying and integrating these two parts.
Núria,
Yes.
I just want to intervene quickly on the projection. We could not see the iterative loops. So if you go back, I would like to show the audience here how.
I think the online audience sees the gray cycle.
It sees, but the audience here does not.
Right, gotcha. This was tested on a different screen, so I apologize. Hopefully I can do some quick adjustments and you can better see this. Thanks for letting me know. Can you see it now? I don't hear you.
Can you hear us now?
I can hear you now.
Oh yeah, we can see it now.
Yeah, so this is the beautiful loop I was talking about. Apologies. And thanks again, Idil, for letting me know. So the infinite loop, that it's iterative, that connects and aims to integrate and feedback loop one and the other. So let's continue. I'm gonna now draw on the design for government course, which is an example of how we utilize the design approach in policy level challenges. And here we combine different methods and perspectives as part of this design approach. So very briefly, I wanted to introduce you some of the tools and methods that also might be useful for you to practice this approach. So we combine systems thinking approach to analyze the wider context of policy. How do we form this narrative? What does climate change mean? What does sustainability mean for different ministries, for example? And we combine it with a human-centered perspective. What does this mean in the world of people? What are the different realities involved behind these different policies? And finally, we imagine what these possibilities could be by using behavioral insights, identifying the entry points that can unlock sustainable change. Examples of this from our Design for Government course. This is a systems map, one tool that we use to make visible, to visualize the connections between systems and visualize, for example, the feedback loops, flows, relationships, the different actors involved, the boundaries that are within each policy challenge, to identify the different norms, for example, incentives that can generate change. This gives us as an analytical tool for understanding the different relationships, but most importantly, to inform us on where shall we intervene in the system to create change. The human-centered perspective involves qualitative fieldwork. For example, here on the left, you can see fieldwork visits to farmers as part of one of the projects that we did in Design for Government DFG in 2015, understanding the different notifications that primary producers receive so that they can comply with regulations, which is not easy because they need to fill out different forms for different agencies that are not connected. And then here on the right, we were working with artificial intelligence project, Aurora AI. You might have heard about this one from the Ministry of Finance. And what you see here is using different methods to involve the ministries and then other actors involved that might represent implementation or but might represent different interest groups or different ministries. We bring them together to discuss the issue early on. Very important to discuss things early on and not when the policies are already decided and framed. And then for behavioral insights, we use behavioral economics theory to understand what are the biases that hinder our rationale and that rule our behavior, so that we can understand how to, when, where to intervene them and design these nudges mechanisms that can steer to desired change. So here on the right, you see Just Transitions case. That is the one that I will show you next. And then on the left, the project we did last year for accessible travel chains, thinking about different pilots based on the capacities of our different stakeholders involved. I am rushing through because I know we don't have much time, and I want to get to this case. This is a case that we work with the Ministry of the Environment in 2020. This, I must insist that this is a real case, despite the fact that this is a course that is done in master's level. Our partners and cases are real. And this case is about addressing the issue of oil heating homes that are used still in Finland, which represent a significant CO2 emission reduction, CO2 emission, and that we wanted to explore means to provide alternative solutions that are fair and just. How can we offer possibilities to transition without punishing or without punishing, let's say, the citizens with traditional instruments that, for example, fines that do not represent or that do not make effective change and are not fair. So the case of Finland is that at the time they had an idea that there are approximately 130,000 homes that still use oil heating. This number was a rough estimate, and they didn't know exactly how many of these oil heaters still exist as the primary source of energy, of heating in single-family homes. So the project, as you will see, by imagining the service, by imagining these possibilities and new types of policy interventions, we also found, or students, I must say, found a mechanism also to collect the repository data for calculating and creating a registry for providing accurate data of how many oil heaters exist today. Now you have to tell me if you can hear the video. 1 second. It's gonna be 5 minutes. This is our students' presentation presenting the final proposal. If you don't hear, there are captions, but please let me know that we can still figure out another alternative.
This is the lifestyle carbon footprint of the average Finnish person. It's over 10,000 kilos a year. To keep global warming below 1.5 degrees, we need to reduce this to about a quarter by 2030 and by over 90% by 2050. This is Lisa. She's a 68-year-old grandmother and a recent pensioner living alone in a 140 square meter oil-heated house built in the 1970s. The average housing emissions in Finland are 2,500 kilos. But just 2 years ago, Lisa's house emissions were over 9,000 kilos per year, so almost the same as the whole average footprint. But Lisa has reduced her oil usage by getting an air source heat pump, decreasing the inside temperature, and heating only part of her house. Getting rid of oil heating would be many times more effective. Replacing it with ground source heat pump and renewable electricity would cut her housing emissions to be well below the average. But Lisa is happy with her current situation and is not planning to get rid of oil heating. As a pensioner, she doesn't have a very high income, and she doesn't know about any financial support she could get for the transition. She also hasn't received any official trustworthy information about alternative heating methods, but has faced aggressive marketing from a company trying to sell heat pumps. While Lisa has a positive attitude towards climate action, many people with oil heating do not. This is Make. He's 44 and lives in an oil-heated house with his 2 children. He's a supporter of the true things and thinks the climate goals are unfair to him, but he also says that he lives ecologically as he consumes very little in general. And while he is against getting rid of oil heating, it's not because he wants to pollute, but because as an unemployed single father, he simply can't afford to. And this is Panu and Jenna. They are in their mid-30s and live in an oil-heated house with their 2 children. Panu has similar views to Make, but he's actually quite willing to get rid of oil heating and says he is just waiting for the government to do something, to know what he should do. At the moment, these 3 households have very different amounts of possible financial support available to them to get rid of oil heating. Panu and Jenna could use the household tax credits, get a loan from a bank, and if doing bigger renovations to make the house more energy efficient, they could get energy aid as well. Being over 65, Lisa could get renovation subsidy when her oil heater breaks, but as there are no sustainability requirements, she could just use it to get another oil heater. But Make can't get any financial support to get rid of oil heating. It's those with lowest incomes that are the least covered by the financial support to transition away from oil heating. But according to a survey, most users of oil heating are middle class, so many of them could change their heating method without any big changes to current financial support system. So the only strong opposition we found for transitioning away from oil heating was not affording to. And while people have different views about the climate goals, they don't have strong value-based reasons to heat with oil. They have oil heating because it came with the house, or because it was the best or even only option when they got it many decades ago. Changing heating method would require active effort, but continuing to heat with oil is the passive default. Just raising the tax of heating oil would feel like punishment to people just continuing to live their lives for something they don't actively choose. And it would be especially unfair to those who can't afford to get rid of oil heating. And for some, especially if combined with driving becoming more expensive, it could even force them to move out of their home. Letting only the wealthy to continue their lives and lifestyles is not just. Status quo bias and defaults are terms used in behavioral economics to refer to people preferring things the way they are, things presented first, and the easiest option that require the least effort. But as these mechanisms are working against the transition, what can we do? How can we disrupt this default and make residents active in their choice of oil heating in a way that is fair, based on capability and need? Our solution.
The oil heating license. To continually use oil heating, you will need to apply for a license. The license is at first granted to everyone who applies for it for a limited amount of time, but having to apply for it will force people to think about their heating method. Our proposal is to create a trigger point for action. Under our license system for oil heating, people have to take active action, either to justify their need to continue oil heating or get rid of it. Taking no action is not an option with this intervention. The license would be required to be able to buy heating oil. The intervention also creates a point of contact that reach all users of oil heating, enabling gathering information about the users and their situations. The information gathered is then used to modify the plan and to be able to offer better support for those who need it, to be able to meet the need of individuals. The point of contact is also used to communicate reliable information about emission, renewable energy, the transition, alternative heating method, and the financial support to the users of oil heating. The information is from an official source, answering to the problem we found that a lot of information the users get at the moment is marketing from companies. The requirements to get the license will be met strict gradually, so that only those who can't change to a better heating method will be allowed to continue heating with oil. For everyone to be able to transition away from oil heating, there needs to be better support. Our approach is to first get the people who can feasibly transition to new heating methods without new financial support to do it. Then there will be more time to understand and meet the needs of those who need more support. When the only people who remain are those who can't transition without support, further resources will be required to provide the support to needed. But the current support could also be improved by linking existing subsidies to emissions. In the renovation subsidy for elderly, there should be sustainability requirements, as there currently isn't any, so that when renovating heating system, lower emission alternatives would be preferred. Also, the household credit tax reduction could be increased for renovation that reduce housing emission. And to support those who with low incomes, there needs to be a new subsidy, especially for getting rid of oil heating.
So now let's travel to 2021.
All right. So this is an example of how imagining, especially at the end, you could see how the group was reflecting on based on this idea or this concept.
This is the lifestyle carbon footprint.
This concept of the oil heating license or license to heat. Then after we have thought about this, then let's link it back to the traditional instruments. What instruments do we have? What are the funding and economic instruments like subsidies that are working or not working? And let's think about those. After we have imagined these ideas, or let's say service solution as a whole, to address the oil transition based on the realities that we have heard. People do not have oil heating because they want to. People, it's not that they cannot afford to change, but rather it's a default. It came with the house. So this is my last slide, just to conclude the characteristics of this design-driven approach, and what does it mean to imagine the service early on? What does it mean to imagine it as part of the policy development and not as a later stage or disconnected? So it means intervening at behavioral level for change. So it proposes a new set of policy instruments. So when we think about what does it mean in practice, what does it mean in the life of people, services helps us to put ourselves in a use case. It helps us to imagine value in use. What does this policy mean in reality? What are the different scenarios? How do people interact with policies? This gives us a new set, a new scale for solving issues at a granular level, and opening up a new set of policy interventions not traditionally ruled or acted by government actions, but rather by people, the civic society, but also networked solutions across different actors in the policy ecosystem and across public, private organizations. It offers a new logic, so we need to use a different logic when imagining. So we call this the what it could be. So we infer possibilities. So it's not a logic of what it is. So today when you are in the workshop, open up to possibilities. We don't know why people don't transition. So what could help them? What could make this break this default? What could it be? We don't know. There's no deduction we can make based on what we don't know, but we can offer possibilities to explore the future. This type of thinking about services, it offers real-time in intervention. You can create this registry and start getting feedback immediately of how many people have these oil heaters registered, and have quick responsive loops that then helps us to iterate and develop further. It requires an experimentation mindset in which we can try and learn things. It's a bit different to the scientific experiments that are used for policy evaluation, in which it's usually done with a quantitative mindset, like let's test this, does it work, yes or no. Instead, what we mean by an experimentation mindset is to use tangible interventions as a means to learn what we don't know. Would this work? Does it give us information about the policies? How do we think about subsidies now that we have explored this idea about license to heat? So we think about services also as entry points. These are not technical solutions. We are not exploring how different data sets will be connected and designing the whole system behind this service delivery, but instead it's a conceptual level enough to help us imagining how change could start and offer possibilities for others to continuously explore policies in that sense. And the last one, and we think that you will be doing this today, we want to put different actors on the same table. So we want to imagine together with data producers, legislators, policymakers, also the society and end users and users of these oil heatings, for example, so that it can help us imagine the service provisioning at different levels of the public administration, and also include the policy makers and decision makers in imagining the future and the realities of implementing things before these have been decided. Hopefully this gives you enough inspiration and foundation on why you should try this, at least today. And also I provide here for later some of the references of the case if you want to see more. Also in our website of the Design for Government course, there are more cases, all available in video format and PDF, and also some inspiring articles, different literature that can help you in engaging others, but to learn more about this and try it at home.